February 20th, 1943, north of Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. As the desert sun burns away the morning haze, German Panzer commanders spot something strange, a column of American Sherman tanks moving as one. They advance with a synchronization that seems almost supernatural. No flags, no flares, no visible signals. Yet 5 Shermans move like a pack of wolves, each one adjusting its course, covering for the other, and moving into firing positions with impossible timing. In his after-action report, a German Oberleutnant wrote, "We could not understand how they coordinated such precision." The answer wasn't in the armor or the gun. It was hidden in the invisible spectrum of radio waves. The Americans were using a secret weapon the Germans didn't even know existed in tanks: frequency modulation, or FM radio. See, by 1943, German armored doctrine was built around the Fugue 5 radio, a 10-watt AM system. It had worked fine during the Blitzkrieg, but here in Tunisia's broken terrain, its limits became deadly. Static, engine noise, and interference crippled communication. A Panzer commander could barely hear his leader through the crackle. Even worse, most German tanks could only listen. Only the lead tank could transmit. When that lead tank was destroyed, the platoon was effectively blind and mute. Meanwhile, every single American Sherman carried a Motorola SCR-508 radio set, a 25-watt, frequency-modulated marvel. FM meant clarity. Even with engines roaring and artillery thundering, American crews could hear each other as if they were in the same room. It also meant a range of 10 miles of crystal-clear communication, while German radios struggled to maintain clarity beyond half a mile on the move. The story of this advantage began long before the war. In 1941, the U.S. Army, guided by visionaries like Daniel E. Noble and the Polish-born genius Henryk Magnuski, standardized a new generation of FM radios. They faced enormous challenges. Tanks are a nightmare for electronics, filled with vibration, heat, and dust. But Magnuski's rugged design, weighing 181 pounds and packed with over 2,700 components, solved every problem. Inside its steel casing was a revolution. When American Shermans landed in North Africa, the stage was set. While the German Africa Corps relied on a rigid, top-down communication chain, the Americans had a decentralized network. Any tank could issue commands. Any tank could call for artillery or air support. To the Germans, this defied all military logic. They feared chaos if everyone could speak. But for the Americans, communication wasn't chaos. It was power. At Kasserine Pass, that power became undeniable. German intercept teams, used to garbled AM chatter, suddenly heard clear, disciplined English voices coordinating fire missions. Reports flowed across miles of desert with a speed the Germans couldn't hope to match. One German officer later recalled, "We heard them talking, calm, confident, precise. Every tank seemed connected to every other. We could not understand how. That misunderstanding would cost the Wehrmacht dearly, because what the Americans had built was something the world had never seen: the first battlefield network." The Sherman's radio transmitter was more than twice as powerful as the Germans. Its frequency range was controlled by quartz crystals, ensuring it never drifted off channel, no matter how much it was shaken or heated. It even had 10 preset channels, a miracle for the 1940s. A Sherman commander could monitor 2 channels at once, his platoon and his company command. This made battlefield coordination incredibly fluid. When one tank spotted an enemy gun, he could instantly call for support. When another needed to fall back, the others adjusted on the fly. Every Sherman became both a scout and a strike unit, part of an adaptive system that reacted faster than any written order. The Germans tried to explain it away as luck or maybe colored smoke signals. But their own intelligence reports described exceptional clarity in American communications, with no static and no fading. To German engineers, that was impossible. Their AM radios were inherently noisy, Every spark plug, every electric motor created a burst of static. Their crews often had to shut down their engines just to hear a command. But FM filtered all that out. What the Germans heard as a miracle was simply engineering ahead of its time. As the war moved to Italy in September 1943, the terrain got worse. Steep ridges, narrow valleys. Here, AM radio should have failed completely. But FM thrived. The signals bent and reflected off mountain surfaces without losing clarity. While German Panzer crews found themselves deaf and isolated in the Apennine valleys, American Shermans continued coordinating with artillery, infantry, and aircraft. During the nightmarish battle for Cassino, where visual signals were useless, American tank units still moved as one. After the war, captured German officers were stunned when they examined the SCR-508. It was rugged, modular, and reliable. Every component could be replaced in the field. The Germans had nothing like it. Their own radios required careful manual tuning and constant recalibration. If two tanks drifted even slightly off frequency, they were on different planets. Meanwhile, Motorola's Chicago plant was churning out thousands of SCR-508s every month. By the end of 1943, over 11,000 sets were installed. Every Sherman rolling off the line wasn't just a tank. It was a node in a massive, invisible communication web, an armored internet, decades before the word existed. The contrast for German crews was painful. They still relied on hand signals, flags, or messengers running between vehicles under fire. The irony was cruel. Germany had pioneered radio-coordinated armored warfare, but by 1943, America had perfected it. At Salerno, German commanders were again baffled by the speed of American maneuvers. Shermans seemed to appear from nowhere, cutting off retreats and anticipating counterattacks. Captured reports used the same phrase over and over. The enemy acts as one organism. That organism was the network. In foggy mountain passes and dark night battles, the FM radio kept coordination alive. American tankers even developed new tactics on the fly, calling artillery strikes directly from their turrets and sharing enemy coordinates instantly. The Germans suspected everything from coded lights to radar. They just couldn't believe it was radio, because their own radios couldn't do what the Shermans could. The Americans were using communication itself as a weapon. The turning point wasn't a single battle, but a constant, grinding technological advantage. As tanks landed at Normandy on D-Day, their radios were alive with chatter. Tank commanders spoke directly with naval ships offshore. Battalion leaders relayed reports to air support. No other army in the world could do that. But even this revealed a flaw. The tank radios couldn't talk to the infantry's walkie-talkie sets, which operated on a different frequency. This gap proved deadly in the hedgerows of Normandy, where tanks were ambushed without infantry support. The solution was pure American ingenuity. Crews simply welded an infantry field telephone to the back of their tanks and wired it into the intercom. Now, a foot soldier could pick up the phone and talk directly to the tank commander. Problem solved. By the end of that summer, the invisible war for communication was over. The Germans often had better armor and bigger guns. But they fought blind and deaf against an enemy who could see and hear across the entire battlefield. The Americans didn't win through thicker steel or faster shells. They won through connection, the unseen lifeline of modern warfare. In the vast, unforgiving deserts of North Africa, a new kind of warfare was taking shape. By March of 1943, a technological miracle was unfolding inside the steel hulls of American Sherman tanks, one that would baffle and ultimately overwhelm the legendary German Panzer divisions. It wasn't about bigger guns or thicker armor. It was about the power of a voice, amplified across the battlefield. Every Sherman that rumbled across the Tunisian sands carried more than just its formidable weaponry. It carried a lifeline, an SCR-508 FM radio. This wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was a revolution. To the Germans, accustomed to rigid, top-down command structures, what they witnessed was pure chaos. For them, information flowed one way, and improvisation was a sin. But for the American tankers, it was their greatest strength. They were constantly talking, sharing intelligence, and coordinating attacks in real time. Imagine a network of steel beasts, seemingly alive, thinking and fighting as one. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Holmes, a U.S. Tank Battalion commander, captured this astonishment in his journal. "It is as though our tanks are alive, talking to one another, thinking together. The enemy fires at one and the others move to cover or respond immediately. It is astonishing." This wasn't just about better coordination, it was a fundamental shift in tactics. Shermans no longer fought as lone wolves or in simple pairs. They operated as a cohesive, intelligent swarm. An attack could be launched simultaneously from multiple ridges, with every tank crew knowing exactly what their comrades were doing, where they were aiming, and where they were moving next. The secret behind this miracle was the SCR-508 radio. This wasn't your standard AM radio, prone to static and engine noise. This was a crystal-clear, frequency-agile FM system. It was robust, resistant to interference, and designed for the chaos of combat. Inside each Sherman, these radios were meticulously installed, protected from the violent vibrations of battle and powered to ensure they never failed at a critical moment. But the real genius was in the integration. The commander, gunner, driver, and loader were all connected, not just to each other inside the tank, but to the entire battlefield network. A commander could spot an enemy, relay the coordinates for an artillery strike, and direct his platoon's fire, all without ever leaving his periscope. The tank itself became a seamless command and control center. The Battle of Sidi Bou Zid in February 1943 painted a tragic but clear picture of this technological divide. American units, caught without proper radio coordination, were decimated by the German assault. But it was a different story for the Shermans that were fully networked. One platoon, led by Lieutenant James Evers, spotted a German flanking maneuver. Through a series of rapid-fire radio commands, Evers called in artillery and repositioned his tanks, cutting off the German advance and saving his unit from disaster. This scene played out again and again across the dunes of Tunisia. German Panzer commanders were left bewildered. They would target one Sherman, expecting to break the American formation, only to find themselves suddenly swarmed by other tanks moving in perfect, deadly unison. They were covering each other's blind spots, sharing targeting data, and reporting enemy movements as if they shared a single mind. A German lieutenant named Hoffmann later reflected on the experience. They spoke to each other as if reading each other's minds. Even when our shells tore through the formation, they adjusted instantly. It was not luck, it was coordination beyond comprehension. Of course, technology alone wasn't the whole story. The human element was crucial. American tank crews underwent extensive and rigorous training in radio communication. Call signs, channel-hopping protocols, and concise battlefield language became second nature. They learned to convey complex maneuvers with just a few short phrases, a skill that their German counterparts, hampered by equipment shortages and restrictive doctrine, simply couldn't match. It was this powerful synergy of man and machine that created an advantage the Germans couldn't counter. By April 1943, the impact was undeniable. The effectiveness of the networked Shermans reshaped entire campaigns. American commanders standardized tactics built around this communication advantage, enabling lightning-fast maneuvers, precise fire support, and coordinated retreats that left the Germans struggling to keep up. Their attempts to jam the American FM signals were futile, and even when they understood what was happening, their own rigid command structure prevented them from adapting. The myth of the invincible Panzer was beginning to crumble, not under the force of a bigger shell, but under the weight of a better idea. The North African campaign proved a vital lesson. Technology is only as good as the people and the doctrine that wield it. The Sherman's FM radio did more than just transmit voices. It enabled a new way of thinking about armored warfare, promoting decentralized command within a connected, cohesive network. It was a lesson born from the feedback of frontline soldiers, where engineers listened to tankers and optimized the technology for survival and utility. By the end of the Tunisian campaign, this simple yet revolutionary piece of equipment had saved countless lives and irrevocably demonstrated the power of marrying battlefield innovation with tactical genius. It was a quiet revolution, whispered over the airwaves that echoed across the entire war. By the summer of 1944, the Allied war machine was grinding its way up the Italian peninsula. The deserts of North Africa had taught hard lessons, but Italy, with its rolling hills, fortified towns, and winding mountain passes, was a different kind of beast. For the armored divisions, this terrain was a nightmare. Communication, which had been a lifeline in the open desert, now became a matter of life and death in every narrow valley and village street. Enter the M4 Sherman, rolling into Italy with more than just its 75mm gun. It carried the SCR-508 FM radio, a piece of technology that had already proven its worth. Lieutenant Colonel Holmes, leading a mixed armored task force, knew the score. He wrote, "Every hill, every ridge, every village could hide an ambush. Without immediate communication, we would be walking into death traps." This is where the Americans gained a crucial edge. Unlike the German Panzer divisions, which often relied on rigid, centralized commands, the U.S. armored units embraced a new, decentralized approach, all thanks to their radios. Sherman crews could talk to each other instantly. They could relay enemy positions, call for artillery, and coordinate with infantry in real time. This wasn't just chatter, it was a symphony of destruction. Take the brutal Battle of Anzio. While infantry pushed forward, Sherman commanders were painting a live picture of the battlefield for everyone. They'd spot a machine gun nest, and a call would go out. A hidden anti-tank gun? The whole network knew in seconds. Before, commanders might have waited for a scout to return or for an aerial photo to be developed. Now, they had eyes and ears on the ground, everywhere, all at once. This allowed for complex flanking attacks and pincer movements that looked almost telepathic to the enemy. And these radios were tough. The engineers knew they had to be. Italian roads, often just bombed-out mud tracks, would shake a tank to its bones. But the SCR-508s kept transmitting. They were mounted with special vibration-dampening brackets and had reinforced antennas, lessons learned from the sandstorms of Tunisia. But even the best engineering couldn't account for everything. Crews became masters of improvisation. If an antenna was shot off, they might rig up a temporary whip or even string a wire to the next tank to stay in the loop. This resilience made Sherman platoons incredibly hard to silence. But the real magic wasn't just in the hardware, it was in the men using it. Tank crews were trained extensively in communication protocols, turning complex orders into a rapid-fire shorthand. During the bloody assault on Monte Cassino, a Sherman platoon stumbled upon a hidden German force. The commander, Captain Robert Jenkins, didn't hesitate. A quick series of transmissions flashed across the network. Enemy on the eastern ridge. Need artillery on grid C, Bravo and Charlie. Pivot south and flank. Within minutes, the plan was in motion. Shells rained down on the ridge, 2 tanks swung around to hit the enemy from the side, and the others laid down covering fire. The German attack collapsed. Jenkins later said, "We operated like a single organism. Every movement was synchronized because we could hear each other and respond instantly. That's something the enemy never expected." After Italy, the show moved to France. D-Day and the push into Normandy presented the ultimate test, the infamous Bocage country. This was a maze of thick hedgerows, perfect for ambushes. Here, the FM network was the difference between breaking through and being wiped out. As Shermans navigated the tight lanes, commanders could spot hidden anti-tank teams and call them out before they fired a shot. They could direct artillery strikes on fortified bunkers with pinpoint accuracy. In one fight near the city of Caen, A Sherman platoon led by Lieutenant Ellen Wright ran into a heavily mined road. Using their radios, the tanks communicated real-time observations, weaving their way around the danger. They then turned the tables, setting up a counter-ambush that caught an entire enemy tank squadron by surprise, destroying it as it tried to flank them. Of course, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Technology can fail. In southern France, a Sherman took a hit that damaged its antenna and shorted the power supply. The crew didn't panic. They used their internal intercom to rig a temporary wire to the tank next to them, creating a makeshift daisy chain. They stayed in the fight, and later, engineers used that experience to design reinforced backup antennas and better surge protection. The Germans were baffled. Their classic hit-and-run tactics just weren't working against these American tank units. They tried to intercept the radio signals, but the frequency-hopping technology made it nearly impossible. German field reports started to sound like a broken record. The Americans react too fast. Their coordination is uncanny. They were forced to rethink their entire defensive strategy, but their own rigid command structure couldn't adapt quickly enough. The campaigns in Italy and France cemented the Sherman's legacy. It wasn't just a good tank. It was the heart of a mobile, intelligent, and lethal network. The radios transformed each tank from a lone predator into a node in a battlefield-wide nervous system. The feedback from the crews on the front lines led directly to better equipment and better tactics, a cycle of innovation that kept the Allies one step ahead. The Shermans, once underestimated, had become instruments of coordination. They learned to operate with a fluid, synchronized efficiency that seemed to laugh in the face of chaos. They didn't just storm Europe, they did it while talking to each other, turning the uncertainty of war into a decisive, tactical advantage. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this dive into military history and technology, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.